Sarah's third attack run was a masterpiece of precision, flying, and weapons employment. She rolled inverted and pulled the A-10 into a steep dive, using the canyon walls to mask her approach until the last possible second. Enemy forces that had been suppressing the SEAL team suddenly found themselves under devastating fire from an impossible angle. The Maverick missile streaked from her wing and eliminated the largest enemy position in a spectacular explosion that echoed through the valley. Secondary explosions indicated she had hit an ammunition cache, sending enemy fighters scrambling for new cover. SEAL Team Alpha is moving to the objective, Blake reported with obvious relief and admiration. Viper 1, your support has been absolutely critical. We couldn't have advanced without you. In the operations center back at base, Colonel Hayes and his staff watched the gun camera footage in stunned silence. Sarah's attack runs were textbook perfect, demonstrating skills that belonged in advanced fighter pilot training videos rather than routine logistics operations. Have you ever seen someone completely transform a hopeless situation through sheer skill and determination? Because that's exactly what everyone was witnessing as Sarah single-handedly turned the tide of an impossible mission. The enemy forces were in full retreat now, their defensive positions neutralized by precision attacks that had seemed impossible just minutes earlier. Sarah maintained overwatch as the SEALs advanced toward their extraction objective, her presence ensuring they could complete their mission safely. 20 minutes later, Blake's voice crackled over the radio with mission success. Objective secured, package recovered. Viper 1, we are ready for extraction and owe you our lives. Sarah maintained protective overwatch as the SEAL team moved to the extraction point, her A-10 circling like a guardian angel above the valley. Any remaining enemy forces kept their heads down, unwilling to challenge the aircraft that had systematically dismantled their defensive positions. The extraction helicopters arrived precisely on schedule, able to complete their mission safely because Sarah had neutralized the anti-aircraft threats that would have made their approach suicidal. As she watched the Black Hawks disappear over the ridgeline with the rescued operative and SEAL team aboard, Sarah felt the deep satisfaction of a mission accomplished. Viper 1, return to base, Colonel Hayes transmitted personally. Outstanding work out there, Captain. The flight back gave Sarah time to process what had just happened. In the span of an hour, she had gone from dismissed logistics pilot to mission-critical combat asset. The radio chatter she monitored told the story of a base-wide awakening to her true capabilities. Back in the operations center, Major Williams was already pulling her full service record. 43 successful combat missions, advanced weapons employment certifications, Top Gun school graduate. How had someone with these credentials ended up running supply missions? That question would soon reshape her entire career trajectory as word of her performance spread through the chain of command. Sarah's A-10 touchdown to a hero's welcome. Ground crews who had barely acknowledged her existence that morning now watched with obvious respect as she taxied to the parking area. Word of her impossible mission had spread throughout the base with lightning speed. Commander Blake was waiting on the tarmac when she shut down the engines. The same SEAL who had dismissed her as sweetheart just hours earlier now approached with genuine respect and gratitude evident in his bearing. Captain Martinez, Blake said, extending his hand. I owe you an apology, and my team owes you our lives. That was some of the finest close air support flying I've ever witnessed. Colonel Hayes arrived moments later with Sarah's new assignment orders. Effective immediately, she was being transferred back to combat operations with a promotion recommendation and assignment to the elite close air support squadron. The maintenance chief who had witnessed the morning's dismissive encounter grinned broadly. Guess they figured out you're not just another logistics pilot after all, Captain. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that everyone has hidden talents waiting for the right moment to shine. Because Sarah's transformation from overlooked support personnel to recognized combat ace proved that assumptions about people's capabilities can be dangerously wrong. The base that had underestimated her that morning would never make that mistake again. Sarah had earned her place among the elite through skill, courage, and the kind of precision flying that saves lives when everything else fails. The classroom air grew thick with tension as Marcus towered over Sarah's desk, his breathing heavy with barely contained rage. Other students pressed themselves back in their chairs, instinctively creating distance from what felt like an explosion waiting to happen. "Marcus," Sarah said with the same steady calm, "I need you to return to your seat. We can discuss any concerns after class." Her refusal to show fear only seemed to fuel his anger. Marcus slammed his palm down on her desk, sending papers scattering and making several students jump. The sharp crack echoed through the room like a gunshot, triggering something deep in Sarah's memory that she quickly suppressed. "Don't you dare dismiss me," he snarled, his face reddening. "I'm talking to you right now. You think you're so much better than me, don't you? Just another stuck-up teacher who thinks she can push people around." Sarah's eyes never left his face, reading the micro-expressions and body language with skills honed in combat zones where missing such signs could mean death. She could see the escalation pattern, recognize the point of no return approaching faster than most people would realize. Maria Santos raised her hand tentatively, trying to defuse the situation. Maybe we should just get back to the math problems?" Marcus whirled toward her with such sudden violence that she gasped and shrank back. "Stay out of this," he roared, his voice filling the small classroom with raw intimidation. Sarah stepped smoothly between Marcus and Maria, her movement fluid and purposeful. "Marcus, that's enough. You will not intimidate other students in my classroom." The protective gesture sent Marcus into a fury that had been building for weeks. He had been testing boundaries with every teacher in the school, pushing harder each time, and this quiet math teacher's refusal to back down felt like a personal challenge to everything he believed about power and control. "You think you can stop me?" Marcus shouted, his voice cracking with rage. "You're nothing but a pathetic little woman playing teacher. I could break you in half without even trying." Sarah remained positioned between him and the other students, her body language subtly shifting into something more alert. Have you ever witnessed someone surprise everyone with hidden talents they never expected? Sometimes the quietest people carry the most remarkable abilities inside them. The question seemed to hang in the air as Marcus's eyes narrowed with confusion and increased anger. He wasn't used to teachers who remained this calm under pressure, and her strange confidence was making him feel uncertain in a way that only fed his need to assert dominance through force. "I'm done playing games with you," he declared, taking a step that brought him uncomfortably close to Sarah's position. His hands flexed into fists as the last threads of his self-control began snapping one by one. Principal Henderson's voice crackled over the intercom at that exact moment, asking all teachers to check their email for an urgent safety update. The interruption seemed to snap something in Marcus's already fractured control. He spun toward the speaker, mounted on the wall above Sarah's desk. "Turn that off," he screamed, his voice reaching a pitch that made several students cover their ears. "Turn it off right now, or I'll rip it off the wall myself." Sarah moved to her desk to acknowledge the principal's message, a routine action that Marcus interpreted as defiance. In his rage-clouded mind, her simple movement toward the intercom became an act of deliberation designed to humiliate him further. "Don't you dare ignore me," he bellowed, grabbing her shoulder roughly as she reached for the intercom button. His grip was strong enough to leave bruises, fingers digging into her collarbone with the clear intent to cause pain. The touch triggered responses in Sarah that had been carefully controlled for 3 years of civilian life. Muscle memory from countless hours of close-quarters combat training whispered through her nervous system, but she forced herself to remain still. What would you do if you found yourself in a situation where someone crossed a line that could never be uncrossed? Sometimes we discover strength we never knew we possessed. Marcus's grip tightened as his other hand moved toward her neck. Marcus's hand closed around Sarah's throat with the brutal confidence of someone who had used intimidation and violence to get his way for years. The grip was meant to terrify, to force immediate submission through the primal fear of being unable to breathe. The classroom erupted in gasps and screams as students witnessed what they had feared might eventually happen. Jake Thompson fumbled for his phone to call for help, while Maria Santos pressed herself against the far wall, tears streaming down her face. Sarah felt the familiar weight of Marcus's hand against her windpipe, and something fundamental shifted inside her. The careful barrier she had built between her military past and civilian present dissolved in an instant. Her breathing remained controlled despite the pressure, a technique drilled into her during survival training that had served her well in far more dangerous situations than a high school classroom. "This is it," Marcus snarled into her ear, his breath hot against her face. "This is what happens when you don't show proper respect. Maybe now you'll learn who's really in charge here." But Sarah's eyes had changed. The mild-mannered math teacher was gone, replaced by someone who had neutralized armed insurgents in Afghan mountain caves. Her hands, which moments before had been grading papers and writing equations, now carried the deadly precision of a combat veteran. Have you ever seen someone transform completely when pushed beyond their breaking point? Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who look the most harmless. What happened next took less than 3 seconds, but would be replayed in the minds of everyone present for years to come. Sarah's left hand moved with surgical precision, finding the pressure point just below Marcus's wrist that would force his grip to release. Simultaneously, her right elbow drove backward into his solar plexus with exactly the right amount of force to drop him without causing permanent damage. Marcus released her throat with a strangled gasp, doubling over as his diaphragm spasmed and his lungs fought for air. Before he could recover, Sarah pivoted with the fluid grace of someone trained in close-quarters combat, her movements economical and devastatingly effective. Her knee came up as he bent forward, stopping just short of his chin in a display of restraint that spoke to years of disciplined training. Instead, she used a joint lock that sent him to the floor in a controlled fall that prevented injury while making further resistance impossible. The entire sequence was executed with the quiet professionalism of someone who had done similar things in life-or-death situations. There was no anger, no revenge, only the cool application of skills learned in service to her country and now used to protect her students. Marcus found himself face down on the classroom floor, his arms secured behind his back in a position that was uncomfortable but not harmful. He could barely comprehend what had just happened to him. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by Marcus's labored breathing and the distant sound of footsteps in the hallway. 28 students sat frozen in their seats, their minds struggling to process what they had just witnessed. The quiet math teacher who had patiently explained quadratic equations moments earlier had just neutralized their classroom's biggest threat with moves that belonged in action movies, not algebra class. Sarah maintained her position over Marcus, her breathing steady and controlled despite what had just occurred. Her eyes swept the room, automatically checking for additional threats or signs of panic among her students. The tactical assessment was complete within seconds, a habit ingrained by years of ensuring perimeter security in hostile environments. "Ms. Martinez," Jake Thompson whispered, his voice barely audible. "How did you do that?" Sarah's expression softened as she looked at her students, seeing the mixture of awe, confusion, and relief on their faces. She gradually released Marcus's arm, allowing him to push himself up to a sitting position. He remained on the floor, his face flushed with embarrassment and the dawning realization that he had gravely miscalculated his opponent. "Are you all right?" Sarah asked her class, her voice returning to the gentle tone they knew. Her concern was genuine. The protective instincts that had once kept soldiers safe now focused entirely on the young people under her care. Principal Henderson burst through the door with 2 security guards, responding to the emergency calls that had flooded the office. He stopped short when he saw Marcus sitting on the floor rubbing his wrist, while Sarah stood calmly beside her desk as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. "What happened here?" Henderson demanded, his eyes darting between the still-shaken students and the surprisingly peaceful scene before him. Maria Santos found her voice first. "Ms. Martinez saved us," she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. Marcus grabbed her throat, and she just stopped him somehow. "We've never seen anything like it." Henderson's expression shifted from confusion to concern as he processed the implications. Marcus Williams, the student who had been escalating toward violence all semester, had finally crossed the line into assault. But somehow his mild-mannered math teacher had handled the situation without anyone getting seriously hurt. "I used appropriate defensive measures," Sarah explained simply, her military bearing evident now in ways it never had been before. "The threat has been neutralized and my students are safe." Marcus struggled to his feet, his swagger completely gone. The humiliation of being controlled so easily by someone he had thought was weak was written across his face. Have you ever witnessed someone step up and protect others when it really mattered? Sometimes heroes hide in the most unexpected places, ready to defend those who cannot defend themselves. Henderson's investigation revealed more than anyone expected. Within hours, he had pulled Sarah's personnel file and discovered what she had never mentioned during her 3 years at Jefferson High. Former Staff Sergeant Sarah Martinez, 75th Ranger Regiment, 2 tours in Afghanistan, recipient of the Bronze Star for Valor and the Purple Heart for wounds received in action. The revelation spread through the school like wildfire. Teachers who had worked alongside her for years suddenly understood her unshakable calm during fire drills, her precise organization, and the respectful way troubled students somehow behaved better in her presence without knowing why. Marcus sat in the principal's office, his bravado completely shattered. The reality of what he had done, attacking a decorated combat veteran, settled over him like a weight he had never experienced. His parents arrived to find their son facing not just school discipline, but potential criminal charges for assault. Word reached the local news by evening. The story of a quiet high school teacher who had served her country with distinction and now served her community with the same dedication resonated far beyond Jefferson High's walls. Parents who had never paid attention to school board meetings suddenly wanted to know more about the heroes teaching their children. Sarah returned home that evening to find her phone filled with messages from former squad mates who had seen the news coverage. Sometimes the greatest battles we fight are the ones that protect the next generation. Thank you for sharing this moment with viewers around the world. 3 months later, Sarah's classroom had transformed into something remarkable. The same students who had once cowered when Marcus entered now participated eagerly in discussions about respect, courage, and standing up for others. Her military service had become a teaching tool, showing them that strength came not from intimidation, but from protecting those who needed protection. Marcus himself had undergone the most dramatic change. Court-ordered community service and counseling had revealed the pain behind his anger. He returned to Jefferson High a different person, seeking out Sarah to apologize properly and ask if she would tutor him in mathematics. His grades improved dramatically under her patient guidance. The school district recognized Sarah's exceptional service with a commendation that acknowledged both her military sacrifice and her dedication to education. Principal Henderson often brought visitors to observe her classroom, where former soldiers and police officers sometimes spoke about service and sacrifice. Maria Santos, inspired by her teacher's example, began researching military academies and careers in service. Jake Thompson started a school club dedicated to supporting veteran teachers and community members. The ripple effects of that single moment of courage continued expanding outward. Sarah still taught quadratic equations with the same patient precision, but now her students understood that behind her quiet demeanor lay the heart of a warrior who had chosen to fight her most important battles in a classroom, shaping minds and protecting futures one student at a time.